Part 2 of The Alpha Rejected Me, The Luna's Awakening.
Chapter 1, The Gambit. The silver fire erupted from me with a fury I'd never experienced before. It wasn't the controlled, focused energy I'd used in previous battles. This was raw, primal power fueled by every ounce of rage and protectiveness I possessed. The light was so brilliant that even Malakar had to shield his eyes. The turned wolves stumbled backward, their corrupted forms smoking where the silver radiance touched them. But I wasn't just attacking randomly. In that split second before I unleashed my power, I'd made a choice that would either save everyone I loved or doom us all. Instead of striking at Malakar directly, I poured every bit of energy I had into the ground beneath our feet. The silver fire spread outward like liquid lightning, racing through the earth in complex patterns that I somehow knew instinctively. Ancient symbols blazed to life in the dirt, forming a massive circle that encompassed the entire pack territory. "What are you doing?" Malakar snarled, his composure finally cracking. I smiled, even as the effort of channeling so much power made my vision blur. "Something you never expected." The symbols flared brighter, and suddenly I could feel it, every corrupted wolf within the circle, every shadow creature, every trace of Malakar's influence. The silver fire was mapping it all, showing me exactly what I was dealing with. And then it began to burn it away. The turned wolves screamed as my power washed over them, but these weren't screams of pain. They were screams of relief as the corruption was ripped from their souls, leaving them free for the first time since their conversion. "Impossible!" Malakar roared. "That level of cleansing magic died with the old bloodlines." "Apparently not all of it," I gasped, pouring more power into the ritual. But the effort was killing me. I could feel my life force draining away with each pulse of silver fire. This was beyond anything I'd been trained for, beyond what any newly awakened silver moon wolf should have been capable of. Maya was howling in my mind, begging me to stop before I burned myself out completely. But I couldn't stop. Not when I was so close to saving everyone. Chapter 2, The Price of Power. That's when Kael broke free from the turned wolf that had been holding him. The corruption that had been spreading through his system vanished the moment my cleansing fire touched him, and he immediately shifted to his full alpha form. His wolf was magnificent, larger than any normal werewolf, with fur like liquid midnight and eyes that blazed with golden fire. He launched himself at Malakar just as the ancient enemy raised his hands to strike me down. The collision was like thunder. Two incredibly powerful beings smashing together with enough force to crack the stone beneath their feet. Kael's claws raked across Malakar's chest, drawing dark blood that hissed and steamed when it hit the ground. But Malakar was centuries old and had powers that went far beyond normal werewolf abilities. He grabbed Kael by the throat and lifted him off the ground with casual ease. "Foolish pup," he hissed. "Did you think you could challenge me?" That's when I realized what was happening. Kael wasn't trying to defeat Malakar, he was buying me time to complete the ritual. Even as the ancient enemy's claws pierced his throat, even as dark energy began flowing into his body, Kael looked at me with those golden eyes and nodded. "Finish it," his expression said. So I did. I reached deeper into my power than I'd ever gone before, drawing on reserves I didn't know I had. The silver fire blazed brighter, hot enough now that the very air began to burn. The cleansing ritual reached its peak, and every trace of corruption within the circle was suddenly gone. The turned wolves collapsed to their knees, gasping and crying as they remembered who they really were. The shadow creatures simply dissolved, unable to maintain their forms without Malakar's influence to sustain them. But the effort had cost me everything. I felt my legs give out as the last of my strength left me. The world spun around me, colors bleeding together like watercolors in the rain. I could hear someone screaming my name, but it sounded like it was coming from very far away. As darkness closed in around me, the last thing I saw was Malakar's face, twisted with fury and something that might have been respect. "This isn't over, little moonchild," he snarled. "You may have won this battle, but the war is just beginning." Then he was gone, vanishing into shadows that closed behind him like doors. And I fell into unconsciousness, not knowing if I would ever wake up again. Chapter 3, 3 Days of Darkness. I drifted in and out of consciousness for 3 days. During the brief moments when I was aware, I caught fragments of conversations happening around me. Worried voices discussing whether I would survive. Arguments about what to do with the freed Riverside Pack members. Reports of similar cleansing rituals spontaneously occurring at other territories where I'd established alliance connections. Apparently, my desperate gambit had done more than just free one converted pack. It had sent ripples of cleansing energy throughout our entire defense network, breaking Malakar's hold on dozens of corrupted wolves across the region. But the cost had been enormous. Her life force is completely depleted, I heard the pack doctor saying during one of my lucid moments. I've never seen anything like it. It's like she burned away part of her own soul to power that ritual. Will she recover? That was Kael's voice, tight with worry and guilt. I don't know, the doctor replied honestly. Her body is trying to heal, but this kind of magical exhaustion, there's no precedent for it. We'll just have to wait and see. During the times when I was unconscious, I dreamed. Strange dreams filled with visions of the past and glimpses of possible futures. I saw Sylviana and her pack during their war against the shadow creatures, watched them make the ultimate sacrifice to protect the world from Malakar's first attempt at conquest. I saw the other Silver Moon bloodlines, scattered across the globe, most of them dormant but some beginning to stir as news of my awakening spread through the supernatural community. And I saw darker visions too. Possible futures where Malakar succeeded in his goals, where the world fell to shadow and corruption, where everyone I cared about died because I wasn't strong enough to stop him. But strangest of all, I dreamed of the moon goddess herself. Chapter 4, Divine Intervention. She appeared to me in the space between sleep and waking, her radiant form shimmering like starlight on water. You took a terrible risk, she said, though her tone held approval rather than censure. That cleansing ritual should have killed you. But it worked, I replied, surprised that I could speak in this dream state. I saved them. You saved far more than you know, she agreed. Your act of sacrifice created ripples throughout the magical realm. Other bloodlines are awakening because of what you did. Ancient protections that had been weakening are now stronger than ever. She moved closer, and I could see concern in those ageless eyes. But there will be consequences, she warned. Malakar was impressed by your power, but also terrified by it. He will not underestimate you again. And there are others in the Shadow Realm who have taken notice of your abilities. What kind of others? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Entities that make Malakar look like a minor inconvenience, she replied grimly. The cleansing ritual you performed was supposed to be impossible. It has drawn attention from beings that had forgotten our world existed. The weight of that revelation settled over me like a heavy blanket. I'm not strong enough, I whispered. I barely survived casting it once. How am I supposed to face things that are worse than Malakar? The moon goddess smiled, and it was like sunrise after the longest night. You won't be facing them alone, she said. Your sacrifice has awakened something that has been sleeping for centuries. The other Silver Moon bloodlines are stirring. Some will come to help you. Others. She paused, her expression growing troubled. Others have been corrupted by their long isolation. They may see you as a threat to be eliminated rather than an ally to be supported. So I'll have enemies on both sides, I said. Shadow creatures and corrupted Silver Moon wolves. Perhaps. But you'll also have something Sylviana never had, a true mate bond with an alpha who has proven his worth. Kael's actions during the battle changed something fundamental about your connection. I felt a flutter of hope in my chest. What do you mean? The rejection damaged your mate bond, but it didn't destroy it completely. His willingness to sacrifice himself to protect you, his recognition of your true worth, it began a healing process that most wolves never experience. She reached out and touched my forehead with fingers that felt like cool moonlight. When you wake up, you'll find that your bond is stronger than it ever would have been without the pain you both endured. Sometimes the greatest love comes from overcoming the greatest obstacles. Chapter 5, Awakening. I woke up to the sensation of warm sunlight on my face and the sound of someone breathing softly beside me. Opening my eyes took more effort than it should have, but when I finally managed it, I found myself looking up at a ceiling I didn't recognize. Not my cabin, not the pack house infirmary. Somewhere new. I turned my head and saw Kael sitting in a chair next to the bed, his head tilted back and eyes closed in exhausted sleep. He looked terrible, dark circles under his eyes, stubble covering his jaw, clothes that looked like they hadn't been changed in days. There were bandages around his throat where Malakar's claws had pierced him, and I could see the edges of other wounds beneath his shirt. "You look awful," I said softly. His eyes snapped open immediately, and the relief that flooded his face was almost overwhelming. "Elara," he breathed, leaning forward to grab my hand. "Thank the moon goddess." We thought, the doctor wasn't sure if. "How long was I out?" I asked, squeezing his fingers weakly. 3 days. The longest 3 days of my life. I tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as the room spun around me. Kael was there instantly, supporting me with gentle hands and adjusting the pillows behind my back. "Easy," he murmured. "You're still recovering. What you did. Elara, that cleansing ritual saved dozens of packs. The reports are still coming in from territories across the region. Every corrupted wolf within a 100-mile radius was freed by your magic." "And the cost?" I asked, though I could already feel how depleted I was. "You nearly died," he said bluntly. "Your life force was so drained that your heart stopped beating for almost a minute. If the pack doctor hadn't been there with a defibrillator." He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "But I didn't die," I pointed out. "I'm here. I'm healing." "Barely," he said. "And it's going to take time. The doctor says you need at least 2 weeks of complete rest before you should even think about using your powers again." I looked around the unfamiliar room, noting the expensive furnishings and the view of mountains through the large window. "Where are we?" I asked. "My private cabin," he replied. "About 20 miles from the main pack territory. I thought you'd recover better away from all the chaos and constant visitors." "Visitors?" Kael's expression grew serious. "News of what you did has spread throughout the supernatural world. Representatives from dozens of packs want to meet with you. Some want to pledge their allegiance. Others want to test your strength for themselves. And there are other things. Non-werewolf entities that have expressed interest in making contact." The weight of that information was almost as exhausting as the ritual had been. "I just wanted to save our pack," I said quietly. "I didn't mean to attract attention from the entire supernatural community." "I know," Kael said gently. "But that's what happens when you perform miracles. People notice." Chapter 6, The Healing Bond. Over the next few days, as I slowly regained my strength, I began to notice changes in the mate bond between Kael and me. It had always been there, even after the rejection, a faint connection that neither of us could completely sever. But now it was different. Stronger, clearer, filled with emotions that I could feel as clearly as my own. His guilt over the rejection was a constant ache in the back of my mind. His fear during the 3 days I'd been unconscious came through as waves of remembered terror. But underneath it all was something else, a deep, abiding love that had been growing stronger every day since my transformation. "You can feel it too, can't you?" he asked one evening as we sat together on the cabin's porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. "Your emotions?" "Yes," I admitted. "It's intense." "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "I know my feelings are probably the last thing you want to deal with right now. After what I did to you." "Stop," I interrupted. "We need to talk about that night, but not so you can keep apologizing. I'm tired of carrying around all this unresolved pain between us." He nodded, his expression serious. "You're right. What do you want to know?" I thought about it for a moment, trying to organize the questions that had been swirling through my mind for weeks. "Why did you reject me so cruelly?" I asked finally. I understand being disappointed about the Omega thing, but you didn't just reject the bond. You tried to destroy me as a person. He was quiet for a long time, staring out at the mountains as he gathered his thoughts. Because I was afraid, he said finally. Not of you specifically, but of what accepting you would mean about me. I don't understand. He turned to look at me, and I could see the old pain in his green eyes. I had this image in my head of what my mate would be like, he said. Strong, confident, someone who could stand beside me as an equal and command respect from the pack. When the bond snapped into place and I saw you, small, quiet, Omega Elara who cleaned floors and never spoke up for herself, it shattered every preconception I had. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I was beginning to recognize as a sign of his nervousness. And I realized that if the moon goddess had chosen you for me, it meant that maybe I wasn't the alpha I thought I was. Maybe I wasn't worthy of some powerful, impressive mate. Maybe I was just as ordinary and unremarkable as the Omega girl I'd never bothered to notice. The confession hit me like a revelation. All this time, I'd thought his rejection was about my inadequacies. But it had really been about his own insecurities. So you lashed out at me instead of facing your own fears, I said. Yes, he admitted. I said those terrible things because I wanted to hurt you enough that you'd reject me back. I wanted to make it your choice to walk away so I wouldn't have to confront what our bond meant about my own character. But I didn't walk away, I pointed out. I accepted the rejection because you commanded me to, but I never would have chosen it. I know that now, he said softly. And I've regretted it every moment since. Chapter 7, Forgiveness and Understanding. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the last light fade from the sky. I could feel his emotions through the bond, shame, regret, hope, and underneath it all, a love so deep it took my breath away. I forgive you, I said finally. He turned to stare at me in shock. Just like that? Just like that, I confirmed. Not because what you did wasn't wrong, but because holding on to anger is exhausting. And because I understand now that we both needed to go through that pain to become who we are today. I stood up and moved to the porch railing, looking out at the star-filled sky. If you hadn't rejected me, I never would have run into the Whispering Woods. I never would have met the moon goddess or awakened my true power. I would have spent my life trying to be the submissive Luna you thought you wanted, and we both would have been miserable. And I never would have learned what really matters in a partner, he added. Strength isn't about rank or fighting ability. It's about courage, compassion, the willingness to sacrifice for others. You have more of that than anyone I've ever known. I felt him stand up behind me, his presence warm and comforting. The night you saved the pack from the shadow creatures, he continued, I watched you face impossible odds without hesitation. I saw you protect people who had never shown you kindness, risk your life for wolves who had dismissed you. And I realized that you were exactly the mate I needed, I'd just been too blind and stupid to see it. His hands settled gently on my shoulders, and I leaned back against his chest. So what happens now? I asked. The rejection is still technically in place. Our bond is damaged but not destroyed. Where does that leave us? Wherever you want it to leave us, he replied. If you want to try again, to see if we can build something real between us, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. But if you've moved past what we might have had, if you want to focus on your role as a silver moon wolf without the complication of a mate bond, I'll respect that too. I turned in his arms to face him, studying his expression in the starlight. This was the conversation I'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. The moment when I had to decide what I really wanted. I care about you, I said honestly. More than I probably should, given our history. And I can feel through the bond that your feelings for me are genuine. But I'm not the same person you rejected that night. I'm not sure I can be the kind of mate you need. What kind of mate do you think I need? He asked. I gestured to myself, to the silver streaks in my hair and the power that still hummed beneath my skin. Someone normal. Someone who can focus on pack duties and raising children and all the traditional Luna responsibilities. I'm going to be dealing with ancient enemies and supernatural politics and probably fighting wars for the foreseeable future. That's not exactly a stable foundation for a relationship. Kael was quiet for a moment, then he started to laugh. What's so funny? I demanded. You, he said, still chuckling. You think I want normal? Elara, I've spent the last 2 weeks watching you recover from saving dozens of packs with a miracle that should have been impossible. I've fielded calls from alphas across the continent who want to pledge their loyalty to you. I've had to turn away representatives from the vampire courts and the Fae councils because they all want to meet the legendary Silver Moon Wolf who's returned to the world. His expression grew serious again. Normal was never an option for us. Not from the moment your power awakened. The question isn't whether you can be a traditional Luna. The question is whether I can be worthy of being mated to a legend. Chapter 8, A New Kind of Bond. His words sent a flutter of something warm and hopeful through my chest. Through the mate bond, I could feel that he meant every word. There was no resentment about my power, no fear of being overshadowed. Just genuine admiration and a desire to support me however he could. You really mean that, I said wonderingly. I really do, he confirmed. Elara, you are the most magnificent being I have ever encountered. Your power, your compassion, your courage, everything about you amazes me. If you'll have me, I want to stand beside you through whatever comes next. Not as your superior or your protector, but as your equal partner. The mate bond hummed between us, carrying emotions too complex for words. Love, hope, determination, and underneath it all, a rightness that made my soul sing. The rejection, I said. If we're going to try this, we need to officially reverse it. He nodded immediately. I've been researching it. There's a ritual, but it has to be performed during the full moon with both parties willing. The next full moon is in 3 days. And if we do this, there's no going back, I warned. A reversed rejection creates a bond that's even stronger than the original. We'd be tied together for life. I know, he said simply. I'm ready for that if you are. I looked into his green eyes, seeing the man he'd become rather than the one who had hurt me. The mate bond was already telling me that this was right, that we were meant to be together despite the rocky start. But more than that, my heart was telling me the same thing. Yes, I said. I want to try. The smile that spread across his face was brilliant enough to rival my silver fire. He leaned down to kiss me, and for the first time since the night everything began, it felt like coming home. Chapter 9, Preparations for the Ritual. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparations and unexpected complications. First, there was the matter of the ritual location. Reversing a rejection required a sacred space blessed by moonlight, and it had to be somewhere meaningful to both parties. After much discussion, we decided on the clearing in the Whispering Woods where I'd first encountered the moon goddess. Then there were the guests to consider. Traditionally, a mating ceremony required witnesses from both the Alpha's inner circle and the mate's family. Since I had no blood family, Sarah and the other Omegas volunteered to stand for me, along with Beta Marcus who had become something of a father figure since my transformation. But the biggest complication was the stream of supernatural visitors who kept arriving despite our requests for privacy. There's a delegation of vampires at the northern border, Marcus reported on the second day. They're requesting an audience with the Silver Moon heir. Something about ancient treaties that need to be renewed. Tell them to come back in a month, I said tiredly. After I've had time to figure out what those treaties even are. And there's a pack of European wolves who claim to be distant relatives of yours, he continued. Apparently, your awakening triggered something in their bloodline too. They want to discuss family obligations. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache building. How did word spread so fast? Supernatural gossip travels at the speed of magic, Kael said wryly. Every pack has connections to other supernatural communities. When you performed that cleansing ritual, it sent magical shockwaves across multiple realms. Everyone knows something big happened. What about Malachar? I asked. Any word from the Shadow Realm? Marcus and Kael exchanged a look that immediately put me on edge. What? I demanded. There have been incidents, Marcus said carefully. Nothing like full attacks, but shadow creatures have been spotted near several pack territories. They're not engaging, just watching. Gathering intelligence. He's planning something, I said with certainty. The cleansing ritual set him back, but it didn't stop him. He's regrouping, figuring out how to counter my abilities. Which is why this bond renewal is so important, Kael said. If we're going to face him again, I want us to be as strong as possible. A properly mated pair has advantages that separate individuals don't. He was right. I'd felt glimpses of our potential during the battle at Riverside Territory, moments when we moved in perfect synchronization despite barely knowing each other. With a full mate bond in place, that connection would be exponentially stronger. Chapter 10, The Full Moon Rises. The night of the full moon was clear and cold, with stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. The moon herself was magnificent, hanging low and bright above the forest canopy. I stood at the edge of the sacred clearing, wearing a simple white dress that Sarah had somehow procured on short notice. It wasn't a traditional wedding gown, but it felt right for this ceremony, pure, symbolic of new beginnings. The clearing had been prepared with candles marking the cardinal directions and flower petals scattered across the ground. It looked like something from a fairy tale, magical and romantic and perfect for the most important night of my life. "You look beautiful," Kael said softly from behind me. I turned to see him approaching through the trees, and my breath caught. He was dressed in ceremonial robes that marked him as an alpha, but his feet were bare and there were flowers woven into his dark hair. He looked like some ancient forest god, wild and powerful and utterly masculine. "So do you," I replied, meaning it completely. Behind him, I could see our small group of witnesses taking their places around the clearing's perimeter. Marcus and Sarah, plus 2 other pack elders who had insisted on being present for such a momentous occasion. "Are you ready?" Kael asked, stopping just outside the circle of candles. "I've been ready for weeks," I said honestly. He smiled and stepped into the sacred space, immediately moving to stand opposite me in the center of the clearing. The moment his bare feet touched the flower-strewn ground, power began to build in the air around us. The mate bond, which had been dormant since the rejection, stirred to life with an intensity that made me gasp. I could feel Kael's emotions as clearly as my own: love, determination, a deep sense of rightness about what we were doing. "By the light of the full moon," he began, his voice carrying clearly in the still night air, "I call upon the moon goddess to witness the reversal of my foolish rejection." Silver light began to gather around us, responding to the formal words of the ceremony. It started as a faint glow, but grew stronger as Kael continued. "I, Alpha Kael of the Silver Creek Pack, formally and completely renounce my rejection of Elara Reed. I acknowledge that my actions were born of fear and ignorance, not wisdom. I beg forgiveness from the moon goddess and from my true mate." The silver light pulsed, and I felt the damaged mate bond begin to heal, threads of connection weaving themselves back together. Now it was my turn. Chapter 11, Completing the Bond. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle around me like a cloak. "By the light of the full moon," I said, my voice stronger than I'd expected, "I call upon the moon goddess to witness the acceptance of this renewed bond." The silver light grew brighter, until the entire clearing was bathed in radiance that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I could feel the moon goddess's presence, approving and supportive. "I, Elara Reed of the Silver Moon bloodline, formally and completely accept the renewal of our mate bond. I forgive past pain in favor of future hope. I choose love over fear, unity over separation." The mate bond snapped fully into place with an intensity that drove me to my knees. This wasn't the gentle recognition I'd felt during my 18th birthday. This was a thunderclap of connection, a joining of souls that was deeper and more complete than anything I'd imagined possible. Kael was beside me instantly, his arms around me as he helped me stand. Through the bond, I could feel his amazement at the strength of our connection, his joy at having me as his mate, his determination to never let me go again. "The moon goddess has accepted our petition," I said, though the words seemed to come from somewhere outside myself. "The rejection is reversed, the bond is restored. We are mated for life." The silver light reached its peak, and suddenly I could see everything. Not just the clearing where we stood, but the entire supernatural world laid out like a map in my mind. I could sense other silver moon wolves stirring in distant lands, their dormant powers beginning to wake. I could feel the locations of shadow creature incursions, dark spots on the magical landscape that would need to be cleansed. And underneath it all, I could sense Malakar's presence like a festering wound on reality itself. He was watching this ceremony, I realized. Probably through magical scrying, but watching nonetheless. The knowledge didn't frighten me. If anything, I wanted him to see this. Wanted him to understand that I was no longer the isolated, untrained wolf he'd tried to capture. I had allies now, a mate whose strength complemented my own, and a bond that would make us stronger together than we'd ever been apart. Let him watch. Let him plan. When he finally made his move, he'd find us ready. Chapter 12, The Luna's Power. The ceremony concluded with the traditional exchange of vows, but ours were different from the standard words. We spoke from the heart, making promises that reflected our unique circumstances. I vow to stand beside you through whatever darkness comes, Kael said, his hands warm on mine. To support your mission and share your burdens. To be worthy of your strength and deserving of your love. I vow to trust you with my heart and my power, I replied. To include you in my battles and my victories. To build something beautiful with you despite our broken beginning. When we kissed to seal the bond, silver fire erupted around us both. But this time, Kael didn't flinch away from the power. Instead, golden light began to radiate from him, his alpha energy rising to meet and merge with my silver moon abilities. The combination was spectacular. Silver and gold lights swirled together, creating patterns in the air that spoke of perfect balance, of two halves finally made whole. Our witnesses gasped in awe, and I heard Sarah whisper, "They're magnificent together." She was right. We were magnificent together. Stronger as a pair than either of us had ever been alone. When the light finally faded and we broke apart, I felt completely different. The mate bond was now a constant, warm presence in my mind, carrying Kael's thoughts and emotions alongside my own. But more than that, I could feel how our powers had begun to merge and complement each other. His alpha abilities, enhanced strength, natural leadership, tactical thinking, were now available to me through the bond. And my silver moon powers, magical sensitivity, cleansing fire, connection to ancient knowledge, were similarly shared with him. We had become something new. Not just mates, but true partners in every sense of the word. Luna Elara, Marcus said formally, stepping forward to offer the traditional congratulations. The title stopped me cold. Luna. I was officially the Pax Luna now, Kael's equal partner in leadership. It was what I'd dreamed of during those lonely years as an Omega, but now that it was real, the responsibility felt overwhelming. I don't know how to be a Luna, I admitted quietly, meant only for Kael's ears. You've been acting like one for weeks, he replied. Protecting the pack, making alliances, putting others' needs before your own. The only thing that's changed is the official title. He was right, I realized. I had been leading, just not in the traditional way. My leadership came from power and respect earned through action, not from rank assigned by birth or marriage. Besides, he added with a grin, I don't think there's a manual for being a Luna who's also the last silver moon wolf. We'll figure it out as we go. Chapter 13, Unwelcome Visitors. Our post-ceremony celebration was interrupted by the sound of howls echoing through the forest. Not the joyful howls of congratulations, but warning calls from the pack's border patrols. Intruders, Marcus said immediately, his hand going to the communication device on his belt. Multiple contacts approaching from the east. Kael and I exchanged a look. Through our new bond, I could feel his tactical mind already working, assessing threats and planning responses. Shadow creatures? I asked. No, he said after a moment of listening to the patrol reports. Werewolves. A large group, but they're not attacking. They're requesting permission to enter pack territory. At this hour? I said suspiciously. Who requests diplomatic meetings in the middle of the night? We didn't have to wait long for an answer. Within minutes, a group of unfamiliar wolves emerged from the tree line, led by a woman who made my newly awakened instincts scream warnings. She was beautiful in the way that dangerous things are beautiful, tall and elegant, with silver white hair that was eerily similar to my own post-transformation locks. Her eyes were the pale blue of winter ice, and when she smiled, I caught a glimpse of fangs that were longer and sharper than normal werewolf canines. But it was the power radiating from her that made me step protectively in front of our witnesses. This wasn't just any werewolf. This was something much older, much stronger, and potentially much more dangerous. "Sister," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the clearing despite the distance between us. "How lovely to finally meet you." Sister. The word sent chills down my spine, because I had a terrible suspicion I knew what she meant. "I am Lyanna of the Northern Wastes," she continued, stopping just outside the circle of candles that marked our sacred space. "Last daughter of the Frost Moon bloodline, and your closest living relative. Another Silver Moon wolf." But there was something wrong with her, something that made Maya cower in the back of my mind. "What do you want?" I asked, not bothering with diplomatic niceties. Her smile widened, revealing more of those disturbing fangs. "Why, to welcome you to the family, of course," she said sweetly. "And to discuss your obligations." Chapter 14, Family Obligations. Obligations? Kael stepped up beside me, his alpha authority evident in every line of his body. What obligations would those be? Lyanna's icy gaze flicked to him dismissively before returning to me. "Pack business, dear brother-in-law. Nothing that concerns ordinary wolves." The casual insult made Kael tense, and through our bond one could feel his anger rising. But I placed a calming hand on his arm. "Anything that concerns me concerns my mate," I said firmly. "If you have something to say it to both of us." Lyanna's expression flickered with something that might have been annoyance, but she quickly covered it with another smile. "Very well," she said. "The Silver Moon bloodlines have ancient pacts, dear cousin. Agreements made centuries ago about how our power should be used and who has authority over whom." She gestured to the wolves behind her, and I noticed for the first time that they all had similar features to hers: pale eyes, unnaturally sharp teeth, an aura of barely contained violence. According to the old laws, newly awakened Silver Moon wolves must be trained and guided by those with more experience. Since I am the eldest of our remaining bloodlines, that responsibility falls to me. And what would this training involve? I asked, though Maya was already growling warnings in my mind. "Oh, the usual things," Lyanna said casually. "Learning to control your abilities properly. Understanding your place in the supernatural hierarchy. Accepting guidance from those who know better." Every word she spoke felt like a trap closing around me. This wasn't about training or guidance. This was about control. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully, "but I'm managing my abilities just fine on my own." Lyanna's smile became razor-sharp. "Are you? From what I've heard, you nearly killed yourself performing a cleansing ritual that should have been impossible for someone of your experience level. That's exactly the kind of reckless behavior that proper training would prevent." She wasn't wrong about the risks I'd taken, but something about her tone made my skin crawl. "And if I refuse your training?" I asked. "Well," she said, her voice still sweet but with an underlying edge that made the temperature in the clearing seem to drop several degrees, "the old laws are quite clear about disobedient Silver Moon wolves. They must be contained until they can be properly educated." The threat was unmistakable. Submit to her authority, or face whatever punishment she thought appropriate. Through our bond, I felt Kael's protective instincts flare to life. He was ready to fight if necessary, despite being outnumbered by wolves who were clearly not ordinary pack members. But before either of us could respond, another voice spoke from the shadows. "Interesting interpretation of the old laws, Lyanna." We all turned to see a new figure stepping into the clearing, and my enhanced senses immediately identified him as another Silver Moon wolf. But where Lyanna radiated cold menace, this newcomer felt balanced. Powerful but not threatening. He was tall and lean, with dark hair shot through with silver and eyes that glowed with gentle warmth. Everything about him suggested age and wisdom, but also kindness. "Aurelius," Lyanna hissed, her composure finally cracking. "You have no authority here." "Don't I?" he replied mildly. "As I recall, the position of elder was granted to the Silver Moon Wolf who showed the greatest wisdom and restraint. Your recent actions in the Northern Wastes would suggest that's no longer you." He turned to me with a slight bow. "Elara Reed, I presume? I am Aurelius of the Eastern Reaches. I've come to offer my assistance, if you'll have it." Chapter 15, Conflicting Loyalties. The tension in the clearing was thick enough to cut with a knife. Lyanna and her wolves were clearly prepared for violence, while Aurelius stood calmly with empty hands and a peaceful expression. But I could sense the power coiled within him, ready to be unleashed if necessary. "What kind of assistance?" I asked cautiously. "The kind you actually need," he replied with a pointed look at Lyanna. "Training that comes from a place of respect rather than domination. Guidance that helps you grow into your power instead of limiting it." "The girl nearly killed herself with her reckless experimentation," Lyanna snapped. "She needs discipline, not encouragement." "The girl saved dozens of packs with a cleansing ritual that none of us would have dared attempt," Aurelius countered. "Her instincts are better than your centuries of hidebound tradition." I could feel the argument building toward violence, and I needed to defuse it before blood was spilled in what was supposed to be a sacred space. "Enough," I said, letting just a hint of silver fire flicker around my hands. "Both of you." The power in my voice surprised even me. It carried an authority that made both ancient Silver Moon wolves step back and lower their eyes in automatic submission. "I appreciate both of your offers," I continued, "but I'll make my own decisions about training and guidance. I'm not a child to be managed or a weapon to be controlled." Lyanna's face flushed with anger. "You foolish little girl. You have no idea what you're dealing with. The power you've awakened has consequences that I'll face when they come," I interrupted firmly. "Just like I faced Malakar's lieutenant. Just like I faced the corrupted pack. Just like I'll face whatever comes next." I looked directly into her ice blue eyes, letting her see the steel in my resolve. "I am not my ancestor Sylviana, and this is not the old world where bloodline meant automatic authority. I earned my power through sacrifice and pain. I'll use it as I see fit." For a moment, I thought Lyanna might attack me right there in the sacred circle. Her wolves tensed, waiting for her command. But Aurelius stepped between us, his own power rising to match hers. "The child has spoken," he said calmly. "Will you respect her choice, or do I need to remind you what happens to Silver Moon wolves who threaten their own bloodline?" The standoff stretched for long, tense seconds. Then Lyanna visibly forced herself to relax, though her smile remained predatory. "Of course," she said silkily. "I wouldn't dream of forcing anything on my dear cousin. But when your inexperience gets you killed, don't expect me to clean up the mess." She gestured to her wolves, and they began melting back into the forest as silently as they'd come. "This conversation isn't over," she called back as she reached the tree line. "The old laws still have power, whether you acknowledge them or not." Then they were gone, leaving only the lingering scent of winter storms and barely contained violence. Chapter 16, A True Ally. "Well," Aurelius said into the sudden silence, "that could have gone worse." "Could it have?" I asked shakily. The confrontation had taken more out of me than I wanted to admit. "Oh yes," he replied seriously. "Lyanna has been known to simply kill Silver Moon wolves who refuse her authority. The fact that she retreated suggests she's not ready for a direct confrontation with you yet." "Yet," Kael repeated grimly. "Meaning she will be eventually." Aurelius nodded. "Lyanna has spent the last few centuries building her own power base. She controls 3 separate pack territories in the far north, all of them ruled through fear and intimidation. She's been waiting for another Silver Moon wolf to awaken so she could either recruit them or eliminate them as competition. And now she's found me," I said. "Now she's found you," he agreed. "And you're far more powerful than she expected, which makes you either a valuable ally or a dangerous enemy. What about you?" I asked. What's your interest in all this? Aurelius smiled, and it was genuinely warm. I remember the old days, before the bloodline scattered and went into hiding. I remember what we were supposed to be, protectors, guardians, wolves who used our power to help others rather than control them. He gestured toward the clearing where Kael and I had just renewed our mate bond. What you did tonight, reversing a rejection through love and forgiveness rather than force, that's the kind of leadership our people need. Lyanna rules through fear. You inspire through example. But I'm still inexperienced, I pointed out. She wasn't wrong about that. Experience can be gained, he replied. Character cannot be taught. You have something she lacks, a moral compass that points toward protecting others rather than protecting yourself. Through our bond, I felt Kael's agreement and support. He believed in me, even when I wasn't sure I believed in myself. If you're willing, Aurelius continued, I'd like to offer you what Lyanna wanted to force on you. Training in the old ways, knowledge of our history, guidance in developing your abilities. But as equals, not as master and student. What's the catch? I asked suspiciously. He laughed, a sound like summer rain. No catch. Just an old wolf who's tired of hiding and wants to help the next generation reclaim what we lost. I looked at Kael, silently asking for his opinion through our bond. His response was immediate and clear, trust him. He feels genuine in a way that she didn't. All right, I said to Aurelius. We'll try it. But at the first sign that you're trying to manipulate or control me, you're gone. Fair enough, he agreed. Shall we start tomorrow? There's quite a lot you need to know, and I suspect our enemies won't give us much time to prepare. Chapter 17, Lessons in Power. The next morning brought the first of what would become daily training sessions with Aurelius. Unlike what I'd expected based on Lyanna's approach, his teaching methods were collaborative rather than authoritarian. He shared knowledge freely, answered questions honestly, and encouraged me to experiment with my abilities rather than limiting them. Silver fire is just the beginning, he explained as we stood in a secluded meadow far from the pack territory. Every silver moon wolf develops different specializations based on their personality and needs. He demonstrated by creating a construct of pure silver light, a wolf that looked absolutely real until you noticed that it was slightly transparent and glowed from within. I specialize in illusion and mental magic, he said as the light wolf bounded around the meadow in perfect mimicry of life. Useful for reconnaissance and psychological warfare. What about Lyanna? I asked. His expression darkened. Ice magic. She can freeze the blood in someone's veins or create blizzards that last for weeks. It's powerful, but it reflects the coldness in her heart. He dispelled the light wolf with a gesture and turned to me expectantly. Your turn. Try to create something that represents who you are, not just raw power. I closed my eyes and reached for my silver fire, but instead of shaping it into weapons or barriers, I tried to think about what mattered most to me. Protection. Healing. Bringing light to dark places. When I opened my eyes, dozens of small silver flames were floating around us like fireflies. But these weren't ordinary fire, they were warm and comforting, and when one landed on a wilted flower nearby, the plant immediately bloomed back to full health. Healing fire, Aurelius breathed in amazement. I've read about it in the old texts, but I've never seen it performed. Even Sylviana couldn't manage that level of precision. Is that good? I asked, watching as more of my healing flames spread through the meadow, bringing life back to areas that had been damaged by frost or disease. Good, he laughed. Elara, that's miraculous. Healing magic of that purity was thought to be lost forever. But his expression grew serious. It also explains why Malakar is so interested in you. Healing magic can be reversed, turned into its opposite. In the wrong hands, your abilities could become something truly terrible. The thought made me shudder. The idea that my power to heal could be corrupted into power to harm was nightmare fuel. How do I prevent that? I asked. By staying true to who you are, he replied simply. Corruption can only take hold when there are cracks in your moral foundation. As long as you remember why you fight, what you're protecting, you'll be safe. And if I forget? He was quiet for a long moment. Then pray that someone who loves you is there to remind you. Chapter 18, Growing Connections. As the days passed, my bond with Kael continued to strengthen and evolve. We were learning to work together in ways that went far beyond the traditional Alpha-Luna partnership. During pack meetings, we functioned as a seamless team. He would handle the political and tactical aspects of leadership while I dealt with anything requiring magical insight or supernatural diplomacy. When difficult decisions needed to be made, we could discuss them privately through our mental connection before presenting a united front to the pack. But it was during our evening patrols that our partnership truly shone. We developed a routine of checking the pack borders together each night, partly for security and partly because it gave us time alone to talk and simply enjoy each other's company. Moving through the forest together felt natural in a way that surprised both of us. I never expected this, Kael said one night as we walked along the northern boundary. When I was younger, I thought being mated would feel limiting. Like losing my independence. And now? I asked, though I could feel his emotions through the bond. Now it feels like finding the missing part of myself, he replied honestly. Everything is easier when you're with me. Decisions are clearer, problems have solutions I wouldn't have seen on my own. I knew exactly what he meant. The mate bond wasn't just emotional support, it was like having a second perspective available whenever I needed it. A tactical mind to balance my intuitive approach, a steady presence to ground me when my power threatened to overwhelm my judgment. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't rejected me that first night, I said. Kael was quiet for a moment. We probably would have made each other miserable, he said finally. I would have tried to change you into what I thought a Luna should be, and you would have been too afraid of losing me to fight back. We needed the pain to appreciate what we have now. He was probably right. The people we'd been that night, the insecure Alpha and the desperate Omega, wouldn't have been able to build what we had now. Do you regret it? I asked. Any of it? I regret the pain I caused you, he said immediately. I regret the cruel words and the public humiliation. But I don't regret the journey that brought us here. We'd stopped walking and were now facing each other in a moonlit clearing. The silver light caught the highlights in his hair and made his green eyes seem to glow from within. I love you, he said suddenly. Not because you're powerful or because you saved the pack. I love you because you're brave enough to forgive, strong enough to lead, and kind enough to heal even those who've hurt you. The words hit me like a physical force, carrying weight and sincerity that took my breath away. I love you too, I replied, surprising myself with how easily the admission came. Despite everything that's happened, despite all the complications and dangers ahead of us. When he kissed me this time, it wasn't just romantic. It was a promise, a commitment, a joining of not just our lips but our souls. Silver and golden light swirled around us as our powers responded to the emotional connection, creating a display that was both beautiful and deeply intimate. We were so lost in each other that we almost missed the warning signs. Chapter 19, The Attack Begins. Maya was the first to sense something wrong. She started growling low in my mind, her attention focused on the forest around us. Something's coming, she warned. I broke away from Kael's embrace, immediately shifting into alert mode. Through our bond, I felt his own wolf stirring, picking up on dangers that human senses couldn't detect. Shadow creatures? He asked quietly. No, I said, extending my magical senses outward to scan the area. Something else. Something. The attack came from multiple directions at once. Wolves burst from the surrounding trees, but these weren't shadow creatures or turned pack members. These were living, breathing werewolves moving with military precision and wearing some kind of armor that gleamed dully in the moonlight. Mercenaries, Kael snarled, immediately shifting to his war form, that magnificent hybrid of human and wolf that maximized both his intelligence and his physical capabilities. I followed suit, letting my own transformation take hold. My human form remained essentially the same, but enhanced, stronger, faster, more graceful. Silver fire began to flow around my hands and eyes, ready to be shaped into whatever weapons the situation required. The attacking wolves spread out in a perfect circle around us, cutting off all escape routes. Their armor was inscribed with symbols that made my skin crawl, runes of binding and control that spoke of dark magic. "Surrender peacefully, and you won't be harmed," called out what appeared to be their leader, a scarred female with weapons that definitely weren't standard werewolf claws. "Who sent you?" I demanded. "Does it matter?" she replied. "You're coming with us either way. The only question is whether you walk or whether we drag your unconscious bodies." I felt Kael's battle instincts kick into high gear through our bond. He was already calculating odds, identifying the most dangerous opponents, planning attack patterns that would give us the best chance of survival. But we were outnumbered 3-1 by wolves who'd clearly been trained specifically for capturing supernatural targets. "Any bright ideas?" he asked quietly. Through our bond, I felt an echo of the power we'd shared during the mating ceremony. The way our abilities had merged and amplified each other. We'd been so focused on the emotional aspects of our connection that we hadn't fully explored its tactical possibilities. "Trust me," I said, and reached for him through the mate bond. Chapter 20, Power Amplified. The moment I opened our connection fully, allowing our powers to merge without reservation, everything changed. Kael's alpha abilities flowed into me, his enhanced strength, his tactical awareness, his natural authority. But more than that, I gained access to his wolf's primal instincts, the hunting knowledge that had been honed over years of protecting his pack. In return, he gained my silver moon powers, magical sensitivity, the ability to see through supernatural deceptions, and most importantly, access to my silver fire. The combination was intoxicating. We were still ourselves, but amplified, enhanced, made greater than the sum of our parts. The mercenary wolves attacked without further warning, moving with coordinated precision that spoke of extensive training. But they weren't prepared for what we'd become. Moving as one, Kael and I met their charge with a display of synchronized combat that was beautiful to watch and terrible to face. Where he struck with claws enhanced by silver fire, the mercenaries' armor cracked and burned. Where I directed healing flames at their weapons, the dark runes lost their power and the metal crumbled to dust. We flowed around each other like dancers, each of us covering the other's weak points while setting up attacks that our enemies couldn't predict or counter. The mercenary leader lasted longer than the others, her weapons and armor more sophisticated than standard gear. But when she tried to use some kind of binding spell to trap me in place, Kael was there to break the magical chains with silver-enhanced claws. When she turned her attention to him, I was ready with healing fire that burned through her defenses like they were made of paper. In the end, she knelt in the moonlit clearing, defeated but not destroyed. "Who sent you?" I asked again, silver fire dancing around my fingers in clear threat. She looked up at me with a mixture of fear and respect. "The Northern Courts," she said reluctantly. "They want to meet with you. Discuss terms." "What kind of terms?" "The kind you negotiate when you've upset the balance of power between the supernatural nations," she replied. "Your cleansing ritual didn't just free corrupted wolves. It disrupted magical agreements that have been in place for centuries." I felt a sinking sensation in my stomach. "What kind of agreements?" "Territory disputes. Power-sharing arrangements. Treaties between werewolves and vampires and fae that depend on maintaining specific levels of magical energy in different regions." The mercenary leader struggled to her feet, wincing from wounds that were already beginning to heal. "Your ritual sent ripples through every supernatural realm," she continued. "Some species see it as an act of aggression. Others see it as an opportunity to renegotiate old deals in their favor. And they sent you to collect me for these negotiations," I said. "They sent us to extend an invitation," she corrected. "But yes, they expect you to come. Refusing would be unwise." Through our bond, I felt Kael's protective instincts flare. "She's not going anywhere near vampire courts or fae territory," he said firmly. The mercenary smiled grimly. "Then I hope you're prepared for war, because that's what refusing the Northern Court's invitation usually means." Chapter 21, Impossible Choices. After the mercenaries left, taking their wounded with them and promising to relay my response within the week, Kael and I returned to the cabin to discuss our options. None of them were good. We could run, he suggested without much conviction. Take the pack and relocate somewhere far from supernatural politics. Where? I asked. Aurelius says there are silver moon wolves on every continent now, most of them with their own agendas. And my cleansing ritual created magical signatures that any competent tracker could follow. I slumped onto the couch, suddenly feeling the weight of all the responsibilities that had fallen on my shoulders. Besides, I continued, running won't stop Malakar. He'll keep converting packs and building his army whether I'm here or not. At least if I stay, I can fight back. Then we fight, Kael said simply. The northern courts, Lyanna, Malakar, all of them. We build our own alliances and make our own rules. I looked at him, this man who'd gone from rejecting me as worthless to offering to fight the entire supernatural world by my side. The transformation was as dramatic as my own had been. It won't be easy, I warned. We're talking about facing enemies with centuries of experience and resources we can't imagine. When has anything about our relationship been easy? He replied with a grin. Besides, I've seen what you can do when you're properly motivated. I'm not worried about our enemies. I'm worried about what they'll do when they realize what they're really up against. His confidence was infectious, and I felt some of my own determination returning. The first thing we need to do is gather more information, I said, my mind already working on the problem. Aurelius knows about silver moon politics, but we need to understand the broader supernatural landscape. Who our potential allies are, what resources we can access, where the real threats are coming from. I might be able to help with that, said a new voice from the cabin's doorway. We both spun around to see Sarah standing there, but something about her was different. Her usual timid demeanor was gone, replaced by a confidence and authority I'd never seen before. Sarah? I said uncertainly. How did you get in here? The cabin's protected by wards that are designed to keep out supernatural threats, she interrupted with a smile that was both familiar and completely strange. I'm not a threat. At least, not to you. She stepped fully into the room, and I gasped. Her brown hair now had streaks of deep red running through it, and her eyes glowed with an inner fire that wasn't quite natural. But most shocking of all was the aura of power radiating from her, not silver moon magic, but something else entirely. What are you? Kael demanded, moving protectively in front of me. Sarah's smile widened, revealing canine teeth that were definitely longer and sharper than they'd been before. I'm what happens when a phoenix bloodline gets awakened by proximity to silver moon magic, she said casually. Surprise. Chapter 22, Hidden Bloodlines. Phoenix. I said weakly, sinking back onto the couch. As in, the mythical firebirds that burn and resurrect themselves? Not mythical, Sarah corrected gently. Just very, very rare. My family has been hiding among werewolf packs for generations, waiting for the right catalyst to awaken our dormant abilities. She held out her hand, and flames danced across her palm, but these weren't silver like mine. They were deep red and gold, beautiful and mesmerizing. Your transformation triggered something in my bloodline, she continued. I started changing the day after you fought Vorthak. At first, I thought I was getting sick. Then I started producing fire, and I realized what was happening. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, feeling hurt that someone I'd considered a friend had been keeping such a massive secret. Because I wasn't sure I could trust myself, she replied honestly. Phoenix magic is intense. It comes with impulses and instincts that aren't always compatible with pack life. I needed time to make sure I could control it before revealing what I'd become. She sat down across from us, her expression growing serious. But when I heard about the Northern Court's invitation and Lyanna's threats, I realized you needed to know. Because phoenixes have our own supernatural political connections, and some of them might be useful. What kind of connections? Kael asked suspiciously. The Ember Council, Sarah replied. A governing body for all phoenix bloodlines worldwide. They've been watching the resurgence of silver moon wolves with great interest. She leaned forward, her red-streaked hair catching the lamplight. They want to meet with you, Elara. Not to make demands or issue threats, but to discuss mutual aid agreements. Phoenixes and silver moon wolves have been allies before, during the first war against the shadow creatures. More politics, I said tiredly. More supernatural entities wanting to use my power for their own ends. Not use, Sarah corrected. Partner with. There's a difference. She was right, but I was getting overwhelmed by the sheer number of factions and bloodlines and political considerations that kept appearing. Every day brought new complications, new responsibilities, new people who wanted something from me. I just want to protect my pack, I said quietly. When did everything get so complicated? The moment you decided to awaken power that had been sleeping for centuries, Aurelius said from the doorway, where he'd apparently been listening to our conversation. Power never exists in isolation, Elara. Every ability you gain, every enemy you defeat, every alliance you form, it all has consequences that ripple outward. He entered the cabin and nodded respectfully to Sarah. Phoenix. I should have sensed what you were becoming. You had other things on your mind, she replied diplomatically. Indeed, he said, then turned back to me. But she's right about the Ember Council. They could be valuable allies, especially if Malachar decides to escalate his attacks. What do you mean, escalate? I asked, not sure I wanted to know the answer. Aurelius's expression was grim. The reports from the Northern Territories aren't good. Entire packs are going silent again, but this time there are no traces left behind. No corrupted wolves, no shadow creature sign. They're just gone. He's not converting them anymore, I realized. He's harvesting them. Taking their life force to fuel something bigger. That's our best guess, Aurelius agreed. And if he's gathering that much power, it can only mean he's preparing for a major offensive. The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders again, heavier than ever. How long do we have? I asked. Based on the pattern of disappearances? Maybe 2 weeks before he has enough power to launch a full-scale assault. 2 weeks to prepare for a war against an enemy who'd had centuries to plan his revenge. 2 weeks to unite fractious supernatural factions who'd been suspicious of each other for generations. 2 weeks to master abilities I'd only just discovered. It seemed impossible. But looking around the room at the people who'd chosen to stand with me, Kael with his unwavering support, Sarah with her newly awakened phoenix fire, Aurelius with his ancient wisdom, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. Chapter 23, The Council of Fire. 3 days later, we found ourselves standing in a hidden valley deep in the mountains, facing beings I'd only heard about in legends. The Ember Council convened in a natural amphitheater carved from red stone, with seats arranged in concentric circles around a central fire pit that burned with flames of every color imaginable. The fire never consumed fuel, never produced smoke, and never went out. It was phoenix fire in its purest form, a manifestation of the life force that powered their entire species. The council members themselves were breathtaking. Like Sarah, they appeared mostly human but with subtle differences that marked them as something more. Hair that seemed to move with its own inner wind. Eyes that held depths of flame. Skin that glowed with warmth even in the cool mountain air. But it was their leader who commanded my complete attention. She was ancient, I could tell that immediately. Not in the way that humans age, but with the kind of timeless quality that spoke of centuries of existence. Her hair was silver white like mine, but shot through with streaks of gold and crimson that flickered like live flames. Elara Reed, she said, her voice carrying the warmth of a summer bonfire and the authority of absolute confidence. Last daughter of the Silver Moon bloodline. You've caused quite a stir in our world. Apparently, I replied, trying to match her confidence despite feeling completely out of my depth. I am Piritha, first of the Ember Council and keeper of the Phoenix Archives. We have much to discuss. She gestured for us to take seats in the circle, though I noticed that Kael and Aurelius were directed to positions slightly behind mine. Sarah, as a Phoenix bloodline, was given a place of honor beside the council members themselves. Your cleansing ritual, Piritha began without preamble, disrupted magical currents that have been stable for over 300 years. Some species are very unhappy about that. Which species? I asked. Vampires, primarily. Their power bases depend on maintaining specific levels of corruption in their territories. Your magic cleaned away influences they'd spent decades establishing. She waved her hand, and images appeared in the flames of the central fire pit. I saw elegant vampires in ornate courts, their faces twisted with fury as they gestured at maps showing their diminished territories. They're demanding compensation, Piratha continued. Either reparations in the form of territory concessions, or your head on a silver platter. And the Fae? I asked, remembering the mercenaries' mention of multiple supernatural courts. More pragmatic, she replied. They see opportunity in the chaos. If the old agreements are being renegotiated, they want to make sure they get a bigger share of the pie. More images in the flames, beautiful, ethereal beings with pointed ears and eyes like jewels, gathered around tables covered with complex legal documents. They're not necessarily hostile, Piratha explained, but they're also not particularly trustworthy. Fae bargains always come with hidden costs. What about other werewolf packs? Kael asked. Surely some of them support what Elara did. Many do, Piratha confirmed. Your mate's actions freed their corrupted members and strengthened their territorial defenses. But others resent the disruption to established hierarchies. I was getting a headache from trying to keep track of all the different factions and their competing interests. What do you recommend? I asked. Piratha smiled, and it was like looking into a living flame. We recommend an alliance, she said simply. Phoenix and Silver Moon bloodlines working together, as we did during the first Shadow War. Combined, our abilities complement each other perfectly. She stood and gestured to the council members around her. Phoenix fire can sustain and amplify Silver Moon magic. Silver Moon cleansing can purify Phoenix flames, making them more effective against corruption. Together, we could face enemies that neither bloodline could handle alone. And in return? I asked, because there was always a price. Mutual protection and shared knowledge, she replied. We teach you what we've learned about supernatural politics and ancient magic. You help us with threats that require Silver Moon abilities to counter. It sounded reasonable, but after my encounter with Lyanna, I was wary of any agreement that might limit my independence. I'll need to discuss it with my mate and my advisors, I said diplomatically. Of course, Piratha agreed. But don't take too long. The supernatural world is moving quickly right now, and neutrality isn't an option when war is coming. Chapter 24, Unexpected Revelations. That night, as we camped in guest quarters provided by the Phoenix Council, I found myself struggling with the weight of all the decisions I was being asked to make. It's too much, I told Kael as we lay together under a ceiling that flickered with gentle flame patterns. I'm 19 years old, and they want me to make choices that will affect the entire supernatural world. You don't have to decide everything tonight, he said softly, pulling me closer against his side. And you don't have to decide everything alone. Through our bond, I could feel his steady confidence in my judgment, his willingness to support whatever choices I made. The Phoenix Alliance seems reasonable, I said. Piratha feels genuine, and Sarah trusts them. But, he prompted, sensing my hesitation. But I keep thinking about what the Moon Goddess told me. About how some of the awakening Silver Moon wolves have been corrupted by isolation. What if this is all part of some bigger manipulation? What if everyone who's approached me is working toward their own agenda? It was a paranoid thought, but given what we'd learned about supernatural politics, not necessarily an unreasonable one. Then we trust our instincts and stay flexible, Kael replied. Make alliances that benefit us, but don't commit to anything we can't back out of if necessary. He was right. I was thinking too much like the Omega who'd spent years trying to please everyone, instead of like the Luna who could make her own choices. There's something else, I said. Something I didn't want to mention in front of the others. What? During my recovery, I had more visions from the Moon Goddess. She showed me things that are coming. Things that make Malachar look like a minor problem. Kael's attention sharpened. What kind of things? I closed my eyes, trying to organize the fragmented images and impressions that had haunted my dreams. The shadow creatures aren't just Malakar's army, I said slowly. They're scouts. The first wave of something much bigger trying to break through from another realm entirely. Through our bond, I shared the visions with him directly. Images of a world consumed by eternal darkness, where things that had never been alive hunted through endless night. Creatures so alien and wrong that looking at them drove normal minds to madness. The Void Realm, I whispered. It's been pressing against the barriers between worlds for millennia, looking for a way to break through and consume everything that exists. Kael's arms tightened around me as he processed what I'd shown him. And Malakar is trying to help them, he said, understanding immediately. Not intentionally. He still thinks he's building his own empire. But every pack he converts, every territory he corrupts, weakens the barriers between realms. He's actually doing their work for them. Does he know? I don't think so. The moon goddess says he's being manipulated by whispers from the void, promises of power that will turn out to be lies. By the time he realizes the truth, it'll be too late. We lay in silence for a while, both of us trying to process the magnitude of what we were facing. How long do we have? Kael asked finally. According to the visions, the barriers are already starting to crack. Small breaches that let minor void creatures through. They'll get bigger and more frequent until... I couldn't finish the sentence. Until what? He pressed gently. Until something big enough to end our world permanently breaks through, I said quietly. Chapter 25, Alliance of Necessity. The next morning brought an urgent message that changed everything. Aurelius woke us before dawn, his face grim with news that had arrived through Phoenix communication networks. The Moonhaven pack is gone, he said without preamble. Completely. 200 wolves vanished overnight, including their Alpha family and all their elders. I sat up quickly, instantly alert. Shadow creatures? No sign of them. No sign of anything. The territory is just empty. Like everyone simply ceased to exist. Through our bond, I felt Kael's tactical mind immediately engage. That's the third major pack this week, he said. Too fast for conventional conversion, too clean for normal attacks. It's Malakar, I said with certainty. He's not converting them anymore. He's draining them. Taking their life force to power something bigger. Aurelius nodded grimly. That's our assessment too. And if he's gathering that much power, he's preparing for the final phase, I finished. Whatever he's planning, it's going to happen soon. I got out of bed and began getting dressed, my mind already racing through possibilities and preparations. We need to accelerate our timeline, I said. The Phoenix Alliance, the supernatural negotiations, gathering our own allies, all of it needs to happen faster than we planned. The Ember Council is ready to formalize our agreement today if you're willing, Sarah said from the doorway, where she'd appeared with that unsettling Phoenix ability to move without making sound. And I've received word from other Silver Moon bloodlines, Aurelius added. Not all of them are as hostile as Lina. There are at least 3 who want to discuss working together. I looked at Kael, silently asking for his opinion through our bond. His response was immediate, do it. Whatever it takes to build our strength before Malakar makes his move. Set up the meetings, I decided. All of them. We'll make whatever alliances we can and deal with the political complications later. Even if it means working with vampires and fae? Aurelius asked. Even if it means working with the devil himself, I replied. Because the alternative is letting the Void Realm consume everything we care about. Chapter 26, The War Council. By noon, the Phoenix Amphitheater had been transformed into something unprecedented in supernatural history. Representatives from a dozen different species sat in careful arrangements around the central fire pit, their ancient prejudices and territorial disputes temporarily set aside in the face of a threat that could destroy them all. The vampire delegation was led by an elegant woman with pale skin and dark hair who introduced herself as Lady Cordelia. She spoke with a refined accent that suggested centuries of nobility, but I could see the predator lurking behind her cultured facade. The Fae representatives were more varied, some tall and ethereal with pointed ears and jewel-bright eyes, others shorter and stockier with bark-like skin and flowers woven into their hair. They all radiated the kind of magic that made reality bend around them in subtle ways. 3 silver moon wolves had answered Aurelius's calls. 2 seemed reasonable, an older man named Theron who specialized in combat magic, and a middle-aged woman called Seraphina whose abilities centered around protection spells. The third, a young man named Darius, watched me with suspicious eyes and kept his distance from the others. And in the center of it all sat Kael and me, the unlikely pair who'd somehow become the focal point for supernatural politics across multiple realms. The situation is simple, I began, addressing the assembled representatives. An ancient enemy is building an army by draining werewolf packs of their life force. His ultimate goal is to weaken the barriers between realms enough to let something through that will consume everything we know. And why should this concern us? Lady Cordelia asked in a bored tone. Vampire territories are well protected. We have our own defenses against magical incursions. Because the Void Realm doesn't discriminate, I replied bluntly. If it breaks through, it will devour vampires just as readily as werewolves. Your centuries of accumulated power and territory won't mean anything if reality itself ceases to exist. That got her attention. Vampires might be predators, but they were practical predators who understood existential threats. What do you propose? Asked one of the Fae representatives, a tall woman whose skin looked like polished wood. Information sharing, I said. Coordinated defenses. Mutual aid when attacks occur. And a joint strike force capable of responding to major threats. Led by whom? Darius asked, his voice carrying a challenge. Who decides strategy and tactics for this theoretical alliance? The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. This was the crux of the whole negotiation, not whether we could work together, but who would be in charge when we did. Led by whoever is most qualified for each specific situation, I replied carefully. Combat operations might be led by Theron or Alpha Kael. Magical workings might be my responsibility or Lady Cordelia's. Intelligence gathering could fall to the Fae with their extensive information networks. A council approach, mused Puritha approvingly. Shared leadership based on expertise rather than traditional hierarchies. It could work, Lady Cordelia admitted grudgingly. But it would require unprecedented cooperation between species that have been enemies for centuries. The alternative is extinction, I pointed out. Surely that's motivation enough to try something new. Chapter 27, The Binding Pact. The negotiations continued for hours, with each faction outlining their capabilities, their concerns, and their demands for any alliance agreement. The vampires wanted guarantees that their feeding territories would be protected and that any cleansing magic would be carefully controlled to avoid disrupting their power bases. The Fae demanded recognition of their sovereignty over certain types of magical resources and assurance that they wouldn't be bound by decisions made by younger species. The Silver Moon Wolves each had their own conditions. Theron wanted command structure clearly defined, Seraphina insisted on protective protocols for civilian populations, and Darius continued to question whether I had the experience to coordinate such a massive undertaking. Through it all, Kael and I worked together seamlessly, using our bond to coordinate responses and present a united front. When the vampires became too demanding, he would step in with alpha authority to remind them that this was a negotiation, not a surrender. When the Fae tried to twist language into loopholes they could exploit later, I would clarify terms with the precision my Silver Moon instincts provided. By sunset, we had the framework for an agreement that satisfied everyone's primary concerns. The Supernatural Defense Alliance, as we decided to call it, would share intelligence about threats, coordinate responses to major attacks, and provide mutual aid when any member was in immediate danger. Most importantly, it established protocols for dealing with Void Realm incursions, specialized teams with representatives from each species, equipped with the knowledge and abilities needed to seal breaches before they could spread. A fine plan on paper, Lady Cordelia said as we prepared to formalize the agreement. But alliances are only as strong as the trust between their members. How do we know that you won't use this cooperation to advance Silver Moon interests at our expense? It was a fair question, and one I'd been expecting. Because my interests aren't Silver Moon specific, I replied honestly. I don't care about bloodline politics or ancient hierarchies. I care about protecting the people I love and stopping the Void Realm from consuming our world. I stood and walked to the center of the amphitheater, where the eternal phoenix fire burned bright and warm. But if you need a guarantee, I continued, I'm willing to provide one. Before anyone could ask what I meant, I reached out and touched the flames. Phoenix fire was different from my silver fire, older, wilder, connected to the fundamental forces of death and rebirth that powered all life. It should have burned me, should have been impossible for a Silver Moon wolf to touch without protection. Instead, it welcomed me like an old friend. The moment my hand entered the flames, they changed color, shifting from red and gold to brilliant silver shot through with phoenix crimson. The combination was beautiful and terrible, representing a union of powers that had never been attempted before. I bind myself to this alliance, I said, my voice carrying to every corner of the amphitheater. Let the phoenix fire witness my commitment. If I betray the trust of this council, let it burn away my power and leave me as mortal as the humans we protect. Gasps echoed around the circle. Binding oaths were serious magic, not to be undertaken lightly. And I bind myself as well, Kael said, stepping forward to place his hand over mine in the flames. Golden alpha light joined the silver and crimson, creating a display of merged power that left everyone speechless. One by one, the other representatives came forward to add their own commitments to the binding. Vampire darkness that fed on life force but could also preserve it. Fey magic that bent reality but could also strengthen it. Phoenix fire that destroyed but also renewed. When the last binding was complete, the combined energies exploded outward in a pillar of light that reached toward the stars. We had created something that had never existed before, a true alliance between the supernatural species, bound by magic and witnessed by powers older than recorded history. Now we just had to hope it would be enough. Chapter 28, The First Test. Our new alliance was tested within days of its formation. Reports came in of coordinated attacks on 3 different territories simultaneously, 1 werewolf pack, 1 vampire court, and 1 Fey settlement. Each attack was different in style and execution, but they all had one thing in common. They were probing for weaknesses in our new cooperation. He's testing us, I said during the emergency council meeting we'd convened via magical communication links. Malakar wants to see how quickly we can respond, how well we work together, whether our alliance is real or just political theater. Then we show him, Lady Cordelia said, her refined accent not quite hiding the predatory satisfaction in her voice. My covens have been spoiling for a real fight. Agreed, said the Fey representative, a stern-faced man whose true form was hidden behind glamour. Our warriors are ready to deploy. Within hours, we had joint response teams en route to all 3 attack sites. Phoenix Firebearers to provide magical support, Silver Moon Wolves to handle corruption effects, vampires and Fey to deal with any non-shadow threats that emerged. Kael and I took point on the werewolf pack assault, leading a mixed team of supernaturals into what had once been the peaceful territory of the Crescent Moon pack. What we found there was worse than anything I'd seen before. The pack house was still standing, but it had been changed. The walls were covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly, carved deep into the stone and filled with something that looked like liquid shadow. The air itself felt thick and wrong, like breathing through oil. Void magic, Sarah said grimly, her phoenix fire flaring in response to the corrupted environment. This isn't just shadow creature work. They're trying to create a permanent breach point. How close are they to succeeding? I asked. Aurelius, who had come with us for his expertise in ancient magic, examined the symbols more closely. Too close, he said after a moment. If they complete this ritual, it will create a gateway that even Silver Moon magic can't seal. The void creatures will have permanent access to our realm. Then we stop them, I said simply. It won't be easy, he warned. The magic protecting this site is unlike anything we've faced before. It's designed specifically to counter Silver Moon abilities. Good thing we're not just Silver Moon anymore, Kael said, gesturing to our diverse team. He was right. The alliance we'd formed wasn't just political, it was tactical. Combining our different magical signatures and abilities in ways that our enemies wouldn't be prepared for. Sarah, can your phoenix fire burn through void magic? I asked. Only one way to find out, she replied, flames already dancing around her hands. Chapter 29, The Breach. The battle for the Crescent Moon Pack territory was unlike anything any of us had experienced before. The shadow creatures that defended the breach site weren't like the ones I'd fought previously. These were larger, more solid, with an intelligence that spoke of direct control from the void realm itself. But worse than the creatures were the environmental effects of the growing breach. Reality itself was becoming unstable around the pack house. Gravity would suddenly reverse in small areas, sending fighters tumbling toward the sky before snapping back to normal. Time moved differently in some spots. I saw one vampire warrior take a step forward and age 10 years in an instant before the effect reversed itself. And through it all, the void magic continued to grow stronger, fed by the life force of the missing pack members. We need to disrupt the ritual circle, I shouted over the chaos of battle, silver fire streaming from my hands to drive back a cluster of shadow wolves. The symbols are protected by reality distortion fields, Aurelius called back, his own magic forming shields to protect our Fey allies from attacks that seemed to come from multiple dimensions at once. Then we need a different approach, Kael said, his golden alpha power creating a zone of stability around our position. That's when Sarah had an idea that was either brilliant or completely insane. Phoenix fire doesn't just burn, she said, her flames shifting to colors I'd never seen before. It transforms. Changes one thing into another. If I can get close enough to the breach point. You could transform the void magic into something else, I finished, understanding immediately. Or die horribly when alien magic tears you apart at the molecular level, Aurelius pointed out. Worth the risk, Sarah said firmly. If this breach opens completely, we're all dead anyway. I looked around at our small team, fighting desperately against enemies that seemed to multiply every time we destroyed one. We were losing ground, and we all knew it. Do it, I decided. I'll provide cover and try to amplify your fire with my silver power. And I'll make sure nothing gets close enough to interrupt, Kael added. What followed was the most desperate 10 minutes of my life. Sarah and I fought our way toward the pack house while our allies held the perimeter against increasingly aggressive attacks. The reality distortions got worse the closer we got to the breach point, until we were running through areas where the laws of physics seemed to be more suggestions than rules. When we finally reached the ritual circle, I could see why the void magic was so effective. The symbols weren't just carved into stone, they were carved into reality itself, creating wounds in the fabric of existence that oozed darkness like infected cuts. This is worse than I thought, Sarah said, her phoenix fire flickering uncertainly as it encountered magic that predated the creation of our universe. Can you still transform it? I asked. Maybe. But I'll need more power than I have on my own. Without hesitation, I reached for our mate bond and the alliance connections we'd forged with the other supernatural species. Power flowed through me, golden alpha strength from Kael, ancient knowledge from Aurelius, even traces of vampire resilience and Fey adaptability from our distant allies. I poured all of it into Sarah's phoenix fire, and the flames exploded into something magnificent. No longer just red and gold, her fire now contained every color that existed and several that didn't. It burned with the combined will of every species in our alliance, powered by bonds of trust and mutual protection that were stronger than any individual magic. When that transformed fire touched the void magic symbols, the effect was immediate and dramatic. The alien darkness began to change, its invasive wrongness dissolving into harmless shadow that dissipated in the moonlight. The reality distortion stabilized. The missing pack members, who had been trapped in some kind of suspended animation, suddenly reappeared as the void magic released its hold on their life force. And most importantly, the growing breach between realms sealed itself with a sound like the universe sighing in relief. Chapter 30, Victory and Consequences. The aftermath of the battle was chaos of a different kind. We had medical teams from multiple species working to treat the freed pack members, who were alive but traumatized by their experience in void-touched suspension. We had intelligence analysts studying the remains of the ritual circle to understand how close the enemy had come to success. And we had a victory that proved our alliance was more than just political convenience. The combination of Phoenix and Silver Moon magic worked better than any of our theories predicted, Piritha said during our debrief session. The transformation effect Sarah achieved should have been impossible for a newly awakened Phoenix. And my ability to channel power from our alliance bonds was unexpected too, I added. I think our formal bindings created connections that go deeper than we realized. Through those very connections, I could feel satisfaction and pride from our distant allies. The vampires were pleased that their contributions had been useful. The Fae were intrigued by the magical innovations we'd achieved. Even our werewolf allies seemed impressed by the decisive victory. But I could also sense darker emotions from enemies who had been watching. Malakar knows what we did here, I said quietly. I can feel his fury through the magical currents. We didn't just stop one breach, we proved that his void-backed magic can be countered. Good, Kael said firmly. Let him be angry. Angry enemies make mistakes. Or they escalate beyond all reason, Aurelius warned. Malakar has never dealt well with setbacks. When he realizes that conventional attacks won't work against our alliance, he might try something truly desperate. As if summoned by his words, a new presence made itself known. The temperature in the amphitheater dropped 20 degrees in an instant, and shadows began gathering at the edges of our vision despite the bright daylight. Everyone immediately went on high alert, weapons and magic ready to respond to attack. But this wasn't a physical assault. Impressive, said a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Truly impressive, little moonchild. Malakar's presence filled the space like poisonous gas, though he wasn't physically there. This was projection magic, allowing him to communicate across vast distances. Your alliance is cleverer than I expected, he continued, his tone carrying grudging respect. I admit, I underestimated both your strategic thinking and your ability to unite traditional enemies. Have you called to surrender? I asked sweetly, though every nerve in my body was screaming danger warnings. His laughter was like ice cracking. Hardly. I've called to make you an offer. One final chance to avoid the complete destruction of everything you're trying to protect. The shadows around us deepened, and suddenly we were seeing visions in the darkness. Images of pack territories consumed by void magic, of supernatural courts falling to creatures that defied description, of a world where eternal night had replaced the sun and moon. This is what will happen if you continue to oppose me, Malakar said. Not because I wish it, but because there are forces at work that are bigger than either of us. The Void Realm, I said. You're working for them whether you realize it or not. Am I? He replied, and for the first time, there was uncertainty in his voice. Or am I the only one with the strength to control what's coming? More visions flashed through the shadows. This time, they showed Malakar as he'd been before his corruption, a noble silver moon wolf fighting desperately to protect his pack from overwhelming odds. You think I'm the villain in this story, he continued. But I've seen what happens when we rely on noble ideals and moral principles against enemies that care nothing for such concepts. I've watched good wolves die because they weren't willing to do what was necessary. And what do you think is necessary? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Unity through strength, he replied. One leader with the power to make the hard choices, to sacrifice the few for the many, to become what our enemies are so that we can defeat them. You mean become like the void creatures? I mean become strong enough that they fear us instead of hunting us, he snapped. I'm offering you a chance to rule beside me, to shape what comes next instead of simply reacting to it. Together, we could create a world where our people never have to fear extinction again. The offer hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Around the amphitheater, I could see our allies tensing, ready to fight if I showed any sign of considering his proposal. But through our mate bond, I felt Kael's absolute confidence in my response. No, I said simply. No. Malakar's voice carried genuine surprise. No, I repeated, standing up and letting silver fire begin to gather around me. I've seen your idea of unity, Malakar. I've fought your converted wolves and cleaned up after your shadow creatures. You don't want to protect our people, you want to own them. The shadows around us began to writhe more violently, and I could feel his anger building. You're making a mistake, little moonchild. When the real enemy comes, when the Void Lords themselves break through to our realm, your pretty alliance will crumble like sand. Only absolute power can stand against absolute evil. Then I guess we'll find out which one of us is right, I said. The shadows exploded outward, and suddenly we were under attack. Chapter 31, Shadow Assault. But this wasn't a physical attack, it was something far more insidious. The shadow magic that Malakar had projected into our meeting began trying to corrupt the alliance bonds we just forged. I could feel it probing at the connections between us, looking for weaknesses and cracks it could exploit. If it succeeded, our entire supernatural alliance would dissolve into mutual suspicion and hostility. Everyone link your power to mine, I shouted, immediately pouring silver fire into the alliance bonds to reinforce them. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Phoenix fire from Sarah and Puritha, vampire darkness that strengthened rather than corrupted, Fey magic that bent reality to protect instead of confuse, Alpha power from Kael that bound us all together with unbreakable loyalty. The combined force of our alliance met Malakar's corruption attempt head-on, and the collision was spectacular. Light and darkness crashed together in the center of the amphitheater, creating a magical storm that made the air itself burn with conflicting energies. Reality warped and twisted as opposing forces tried to unmake each other. But our alliance held. More than held, it grew stronger under pressure, the bonds between us deepening as we shared the effort of resisting Malakar's attack. When the storm finally cleared, the shadow magic was gone, banished by the combined will of beings who had chosen cooperation over conquest. Impossible, Malakar's voice whispered from the fading darkness. No alliance has ever been that stable. What did you do? We chose to trust each other, I replied. Something you've forgotten how to do. There was a long pause, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a note of something that might have been fear. This changes nothing, he said, but the confidence was gone from his tone. The Void Lords are still coming. Your pretty cooperation won't save you when reality itself begins to unravel. We'll see, I said. The shadows dispersed, and his presence vanished, leaving us alone with the echoes of power and the knowledge that we'd just survived our first test as a united force. Well, Lady Cordelia said into the silence, that was educational. Indeed, agreed Puritha. I believe our alliance is stronger than any of us expected. But I was looking at the place where the shadows had been deepest, where Malakar's projection had been strongest. There was something there, a faint trace of energy that made my newly sensitized magical senses recoil. Aurelius, I said quietly. Can you feel that? He followed my gaze and paled. Void magic residue. The projection wasn't just communication, it was reconnaissance. He was studying our alliance bonds, learning how they work. Why would he need to know that? Kael asked. The answer came to me with horrible clarity. Because he's not planning to attack our alliance directly. He's planning to corrupt it from within. The Luna's promise. As the emergency council session dispersed and our allies returned to their various territories, I found myself standing alone with Kael in the now quiet amphitheater. The eternal phoenix fire still burned in the center, but it had returned to its normal red and gold colors. The only sign of our dramatic alliance binding was a faint silver thread running through the flames, visible only to magical sight. Regrets? Kael asked, sensing my thoughtful mood through our bond. About which part? I replied. Forgiving you, bonding with you, forming a supernatural alliance, or making myself the primary target of an ancient evil. Any of it. All of it. I considered the question seriously. 3 weeks ago, I'd been a lonely omega with no friends, no family, and no future beyond menial labor. Tonight, I was a Luna with a mate who loved me, allies across multiple species, and the power to protect everyone I cared about. The transformation hadn't been easy. It had cost me pain, exhaustion, and the simple, uncomplicated life I'd once thought I wanted. But looking back, I couldn't imagine choosing any other path. No regrets, I said firmly. Even if I'd known everything that was going to happen, would have made the same choices. Even the part where you nearly died performing an impossible ritual? Especially that part, I replied. Because it showed me who I really am. Not the weak Omega everyone thought they knew, but someone who would literally burn herself out before letting innocent people suffer. Kael moved to stand behind me, his arms wrapping around my waist as we both stared into the eternal flames. What comes next? He asked. Next, we prepare for war, I said. Real war, not just the skirmishes we've been fighting. Malachar is going to escalate, and when he does, we need to be ready. And after the war? I leaned back against his solid warmth, letting myself imagine a future where we'd won, where the threats were gone, where we could focus on building something beautiful instead of just surviving. After the war, we build the world we want to live in, I said. A world where bloodline doesn't determine worth, where power is used to protect instead of control, where someone like me could grow up knowing they matter. Through our bond, I felt his love and admiration wash over me like warm sunlight. You matter, he said softly. You've always mattered. It just took me too long to see it. And it took rejection and heartbreak for me to see it too, I replied. Maybe that was the point. Maybe we needed to lose each other to appreciate what we'd found. The phoenix fire flared brighter for a moment, as if approving of our words. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. More threats to face, more impossible decisions to make, more enemies who wanted to use or destroy what I'd become. But tonight, I was exactly where I belonged. I was Luna Elara, mate to Alpha Kael, last of the Silver Moon bloodline, and protector of all wolves. I had allies who trusted me, power that grew stronger every day, and a love that had survived rejection and been reborn even stronger. Let Malachar come. Let the Void Lords test their strength against ours. Let the corrupt Silver Moon wolves and hostile supernatural courts make their moves. I was ready for all of them. Because I was no longer the girl who could be broken by cruel words or intimidated by superior force. I was no longer the Omega who would accept scraps and be grateful for them. I was something new. Something that had never existed before. I was the Luna who had risen from rejection to become a legend. And my story was just beginning.
To be continued in Part 3, The Luna's War. Next episode preview. As Malachar's true plan unfolds, Elara discovers that several members of her own alliance have been compromised by void magic. With enemies closing in from all sides and reality itself beginning to fracture, she must choose between saving her mate or saving the world. And in the shadows, Lyanna makes her own move to claim Silver Moon leadership through ancient rites that could strip Elara of her power forever.